In the oldest tavern of the capital, where merchants, soldiers, and nobles mingled beneath smoke-stained rafters and candlelight that danced like whispered secrets, Elara Nightshade moved through the crowd like a ghost wrapped in crimson. Her white hair caught the firelight, turning it to silver flame. Her pale skin seemed almost translucent in the dim glow, as if she were carved from moonstone and draped in blood-red silk. She carried trays of ale and wine, her steps silent, her presence unremarkable to those who looked but did not see. They thought her simple. They thought her forgettable. They were wrong. She heard everything. The drunken boasts of soldiers, the veiled threats of merchants, the bitter complaints of nobles who believed themselves above consequence. And she understood more than they could ever imagine. For Elara possessed a gift that had slept in her blood for generations, a knowledge that stirred in her dreams and whispered through her waking hours. She understood the ancient language, that forgotten tongue of kings and ritual, of prophecy and power. She had never been taught. She simply knew. And she kept that knowledge locked behind her silence, as one might hide a blade beneath a cloak. Tonight, the tavern hummed with anticipation. Word had spread that the Alpha King himself would grace the establishment with his presence, a rare occurrence that sent the staff into frantic preparation and the patrons into excited whispers. Elara felt the shift in the air before she saw him enter. It was as if the very atmosphere bowed. King Valerius Shadow-Walker filled the doorway like a living storm, tall and powerfully built. His presence commanded attention without effort. His long black hair fell past his shoulders, wild and untamed as a wolf's mane, and his beard framed a face carved from granite and shadow. His eyes were dark as midnight forests, holding depths that spoke of battles fought and enemies vanquished. He wore authority like a second skin, and danger rolled off him in waves. Men stepped aside. Women lowered their eyes. The tavern itself seemed to hold its breath. Beside him walked Kalen, his right hand and most trusted advisor. Where Valerius was raw power barely contained, Kalen was cunning wrapped in charm. He smiled easily, laughed loudly, and his eyes never stopped calculating. The two men moved to a private table in the corner, away from the masses, but still visible, still commanding the room's attention. Elara was assigned to serve them. She approached with steady steps, her heart calm despite the weight of their gazes. She had served kings and beggars alike. They were all just men in the end, all mortal, all temporary. The evening progressed with wine and conversation. Valerius spoke little, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the wooden floor. Kalen spoke for both of them, entertaining the king with tales and jests. As the wine flowed, Kalen's amusement grew sharper, more reckless. His eyes landed on Elara as she refilled their cups, and a cruel light sparked within them. He leaned toward Valerius, his voice pitched low, but not low enough. Alara's acute hearing caught every word. "My king, I have a challenge for you, a test of your command of the old ways." Valerius raised an eyebrow. His interest piqued despite his usual stoic demeanor. "What manner of challenge?" Kalen gestured toward Elara with his cup. "The ancient language. Give an order to the girl in the old tongue, something befitting her station. Let us see if the words of kings are still remembered, even if they are no longer understood by common ears. A cruel game, a display of superiority wrapped in linguistic prowess." Valerius considered for a moment, his dark eyes studying Elara's face. She met his gaze steadily, revealing nothing. He thought her unaware. He thought her incapable of comprehension. He thought wrong. Valerius's lips curved into the barest hint of a smile, though it held no warmth. He spoke, his voice taking on a formal cadence, words flowing in a language that had not been heard in these halls for centuries. Catharanim servant, ad you who are beneath notice, bring more wine for your betters. The words were precisely constructed, laced with dismissal, and designed to belittle. But there was an error in the grammatical structure, a subtle misplacement that changed the nuance from formal command to awkward insult. To those who did not understand, it sounded impressive, authoritative. To Elara, it revealed the king's imperfect mastery of the tongue he wielded like a weapon. Before we continue with the story, I want to thank everyone who supports the channel and loves our Alpha King romances. In the pinned comment, you'll find a special selection of the best Amazon audiobooks that inspire our stories. If you purchase any audiobook through those links, you'll be directly supporting the channel and helping us create more stories. Tell us where you're watching from and how old you are in the comments. I hope you enjoy the story. The tavern continued its noise around them, oblivious. Kaelin grinned, waiting for Elara to stand confused, perhaps frightened by the strange words from the king's mouth. Instead, Elara stood perfectly still. The moment stretched like pulled silk. Then she sat down her tray with deliberate precision. Her pale eyes, which had seemed so unremarkable moments before, suddenly blazed with an inner fire. She straightened her spine, and something ancient and powerful flickered across her features. When she spoke, her voice was clear and unwavering, each syllable pronounced with perfect precision in the same ancient language. Nimorath Valerius Ethan Shadow-Walker, Dothan Mirnathana Vivkeleth Nimkorthara. I, who observe all, are Valerius of the Shadow-Walker line. Hear your flawed command, and correct your construction. I serve those worthy of proper speech. The effect was immediate and devastating. The ancient language was not merely translated, but corrected, improved, and returned with the grace and authority of one born to it. She had not only understood his insult, but had identified his grammatical error, fixed it, and delivered a response that was simultaneously respectful and reproachful. She had spoken his full title in the old form, a title that few even knew existed, and she had done so with the bearing of one who had every right to do so. Silence crashed over their corner of the tavern like a wave. Valerius's hand froze halfway to his cup. Kaelin's grin vanished as if slapped from his face. For a long moment neither man moved, neither breathed. The Alpha King stared at the young woman in the red dress as if seeing her for the first time, which in many ways he was. When Valerius finally spoke, his voice was low and controlled, but beneath it ran currents of shock and something else, something like recognition. You speak the ancient language? It was not a question, but Elara nodded once. I do. Impossible, Kaelin hissed, recovering from his shock with anger. No common girl could know such things. This is trickery, some performance learned by rote. Elara turned her pale gaze to him, and for an instant Kaelin saw something in her eyes that made him recoil. Power, ancient and undeniable. Shall I recite the 12 verses of the first bonding? Perhaps discuss the grammatical distinctions between the northern and southern dialects? Or would you prefer I translate the inscription on the blade at your king's hip, the one written in script so old even the royal scholars have forgotten its meaning? Valerius's hand dropped to the pommel of his sword, where indeed ancient script was carved. He had inherited the blade, had worn it into countless battles, but had never known what the symbols meant. He looked at this woman, this waitress in a red dress with hair like winter snow, and felt the ground shift beneath his understanding of the world. Who are you? He demanded, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority. Elara met his gaze without flinching. I am Elara Nightshade. That is all I have ever been, and all I know myself to be. But even as she spoke the words, she felt their inadequacy, because the truth was, she did not fully understand what she was. The knowledge had come to her like dawn breaking, gradual and inevitable. Words in dreams, understanding without study. A feeling of connection to something vast and ancient that pulsed just beyond the edge of her awareness. She had learned to hide it, to appear ordinary, because extraordinary people attracted dangerous attention. Tonight, that careful facade had shattered. Valerius rose from his seat, his full height and presence suddenly overwhelming. The tavern's noise had died completely now. Everyone watched. Everyone waited. The Alpha King approached Elara slowly, as one might approach something wild and potentially dangerous. When he stood before her, close enough that she could smell leather and pine and something wilder, something of forest and storm, he spoke again in the ancient language. Elara Nightshade, Velkathera Nimerath, Aswatara Nimcastin. Elara Nightshade, you who observe all, what are you truly? His pronunciation was better this time, more careful. He was learning, adapting. This was a man who made mistakes once and remembered the lesson. Elara answered in the common tongue, because this answer deserved to be heard by all. I am a woman who hears what others do not, who understands what others have forgotten. Beyond that, I cannot say. I was not raised to this knowledge. It simply is. Valerius stared at her for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face as if he might find answers written there. Then he did something that shocked everyone present. He inclined his head to her, a gesture of respect from a king to an equal. Come to the castle tomorrow at sunset. We will speak further. It was not a request, but neither was it a command laced with threat. It was an invitation wrapped in inevitability. Elara understood that her life had just changed irrevocably. She nodded once, accepting. Valerius turned and left the tavern, Kaelin hurrying after him. The noise returned slowly, like water filling a vessel. But now it was all speculation and whispers about the mysterious woman who had spoken the impossible. Elara finished her shift in a daze, her mind racing. She returned to her small room above a baker's shop and sat by the window, watching the moon rise over the capital. What was she? Why had this gift awakened in her? And what did the Alpha King want? She did not sleep that night. Instead, she listened to the voice that had always whispered in the back of her mind, the one that spoke in fragments of the ancient language. Tonight, it spoke more clearly than ever before. You are seen now. Everything changes. Trust your blood. Trust your knowing. The path ahead is dangerous and necessary. When sunset came the following evening, Elara, dressed in the same red dress, braided her white hair with careful precision, and walked through the capital streets toward the castle that dominated the skyline. Guards expected her. They led her through halls of stone and tapestry, past chambers where decisions were made and fates decided, until she stood before great oak doors carved with wolves and moons. Inside, Valerius waited. He had dismissed his attendants, all except Kaelin, who stood in the corner, with an expression of barely concealed hostility. The Alpha King sat not on his throne, but in a chair by the fire, an attempt to make the meeting seem less formal, less intimidating. It did not entirely succeed. The man himself was too imposing for casual ease. Sit, Valerius said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Elara sat, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. The king studied her in silence for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than it had been in the tavern, thoughtful. I have spent the day consulting with scholars, with the oldest records in the royal library. The ancient language has not been spoken fluently outside of ritual in nearly 400 years. It is preserved in texts studied by academics, but not spoken, not known in the way you know it. Elara nodded. I understand this is unusual. Unusual? Kaelin scoffed from his corner. It is impossible. No one learns such a language without instruction, without years of study. She is lying, my king. Or she is dangerous. Valerius held up a hand, silencing his advisor without looking at him. His eyes remained fixed on Elara. How? One word. The only question that mattered. How? Elara took a breath, choosing her words carefully. I have always heard languages differently than others. When I was a child, I would hear merchants speaking in foreign tongues and understand them without knowing how. But the ancient language, it was not like that. It did not come from outside. It came from within, like a memory of something I never experienced, like knowledge written in my bones. She paused, then continued. It began with dreams. I would wake with words on my lips, words that meant things I could not explain in common speech. Then I found a fragment of a text in a market stall, part of an old scroll being sold for kindling. I could read it perfectly, as easily as I read the tavern's menu. From there, the knowledge grew. When I heard you speak last night, I understood not just the words, but the intent, the structure, the history behind each syllable. Valerius leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his intensity focused entirely on her. The scholars believe the ancient language was the tongue of the first ones, the original pacts that formed the foundations of our people. They say it was a language that carried power in its very structure, that those who spoke it truly could command, not just with authority, but with truth that could not be denied or twisted. Yes, Elara whispered, feeling that truth resonate in her chest. The words have weight. They have power. To speak falsely in the ancient language is nearly impossible. The tongue rejects deception. Kalen moved from his corner, his face flushed with anger or perhaps fear. This is nonsense, ancient superstition. My king, you cannot seriously believe. I believe what I heard. Valerius cut him off, his voice hard as iron. I spoke words of dismissal to test a theory, to amuse myself with a cruel jest, and she responded with correction and dignity. That is not a memorized performance. That is mastery. He turned back to Elara. Which brings me to my question. Why were you working in a tavern? Why hide such an ability? Elara smiled sadly. Because I learned early that being different is dangerous. When I was younger, I made the mistake of correcting a merchant who was cheating customers using false translations. He accused me of witchcraft. I barely escaped. I learned to be quiet, to be invisible, to serve and listen and reveal nothing. Understanding flickered across Valerius's face and something else. Something that looked almost like regret. I humiliated you last night. I used an ancient and sacred tongue to belittle someone I thought beneath me. You had every right to remain silent, to let me wallow in my ignorance and cruelty. Why did you respond? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Elara considered it carefully. Why had she revealed herself? She had spent years hiding, protecting herself. What had changed? Because, she said slowly, I was tired of pretending, and because the words you spoke deserved better than to be used for mockery. The ancient language is sacred. Even if I do not fully understand why I know it should be respected. For the first time since she had entered, Valerius smiled. It was a small expression, barely a curve of his lips beneath his dark beard, but it transformed his face. For an instant, the fearsome Alpha King disappeared, and she saw something gentler, something almost human. You shamed a king to defend the dignity of a dead language. You are either very brave or very foolish. Perhaps both, Elara admitted. Kalen cleared his throat loudly. This is all very fascinating, but what do you intend to do, my king? Surely you cannot allow someone with such unusual abilities to simply walk free. If she can speak the ancient language, who knows what else she might be capable of, what threat she might pose. Valerius's smile vanished, replaced by a look of cold consideration. For a moment, Elara's heart raced. Was she a prisoner now? Had she revealed herself only to be locked away? But then the king shook his head. No, I intend to do something far more dangerous. I intend to trust her. Kalen's face paled. My king. Enough, Kalen. I have made my decision. Valerius stood and Elara rose with him. He circled her slowly, studying her as a general might study a battlefield. Elara Nightshade, I am making you an offer. Remain at the castle as my consultant on matters of the ancient language. There are texts in the royal library that no one has been able to fully translate. There are rituals we perform by rote without understanding. You could help us reclaim knowledge that has been lost. Elara's mind spun. This was more than she had imagined, more than she had feared or hoped. And if I refuse? Valerius stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Then you are free to go. I will not compel you, but I think you are as curious about your abilities as I am. I think you want to understand what you are, and why this gift has awakened in you. The castle library holds records that go back to the first bonding. If answers exist, they are here. He was right. The questions had haunted her for years. Why her? Why now? What did it mean? The possibility of answers was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. I accept, she said. Valerius nodded once, satisfied. Good. Kaelin, arrange for chambers to be prepared in the East Wing. Elara will need access to the library, and to me. Any scholar or guard who questions her presence answers to me directly. Kaelin's jaw tightened, but he bowed. As you command, my king. His voice dripped with barely suppressed resentment. As arrangements were made, Elara found herself wondering what she had just agreed to. The castle was a place of power and intrigue, of politics and danger. She was walking into a world she did not understand, armed only with a gift she could not explain. But as she glanced at Valerius, at the intensity in his dark eyes, and the careful attention he paid to every word she spoke, she felt something stir in her chest. Not fear, but something else, something that felt like recognition. The first weeks in the castle were overwhelming. Elara was given chambers that were larger than the entire room she had rented above the baker's shop. She had servants, though she insisted on caring for herself. She had access to the vast library, a room that stretched 3 stories high and contained thousands of volumes, scrolls, and fragments. And she had regular meetings with Valerius, sessions where they would sit together and work through ancient texts, his formal education meeting her instinctive understanding in a collaboration that yielded stunning results. They discovered incantations that had been mispronounced for generations. They corrected historical records that had been mistranslated, changing the understanding of key events in the Pack's history. They found prophecies that had been dismissed as nonsense because no one could read them properly. And slowly, carefully, they began to find references to something called the Luna Gift. It was Elara who first stumbled across the term in a fragment so old that the parchment crumbled at the edges. She brought it to Valerius late one evening, finding him in his private study, a room lined with maps and weapons and books he read for pleasure rather than duty. I found something, she said without preamble. They had moved past formality in these sessions when it was just the two of them. He was not the king, and she was not the consultant. They were simply two people trying to solve a mystery. Valerius looked up from the battle reports he had been reviewing, his face weary. He had been dealing with border disputes all day, and exhaustion lined his features. But when he saw her expression, he set aside the reports immediately. Show me. Elara laid the fragment on his desk carefully. Together they bent over it, their heads nearly touching as they studied the ancient script. She began to translate, her finger tracing the words. In the first times, when the Packs were young and the bonds were pure, and certain women were born with the Luna Gift, they could hear the ancient language not as learned speech, but as inherent truth. They could understand the bonds that tied pack to pack, wolf to wolf. They could sense danger and deception. They were the bridges between the Alpha's strength and the Pack's heart. Her voice trailed off. Valerius lifted his head to look at her, his dark eyes intense. You think this is what you are? Luna gifted. I do not know what I am, Elara admitted. But the description matches. I hear the ancient language as if it were my native tongue. And lately I have begun to sense other things. Emotions in the castle, tensions, lies. Valerius straightened, his expression unreadable. What lies? Elara hesitated. This was dangerous territory. But she had come this far. Small ones mostly, courtiers saying one thing and meaning another. But there are patterns. Symbols I have seen repeated in places they should not be. Conversations that stop when I approach. I think someone in the castle is working against you. She expected disbelief, perhaps anger. Instead, Valerius sighed heavily and moved to pour himself a drink. I have suspected as much. There have been information leaks, plans that should have been secret somehow reaching our enemies, but I have not been able to identify the source. He looked at her over the rim of the glass. Can you? The question was simple, but the weight behind it was enormous. He was asking her to spy, to use her abilities to root out a traitor. It went far beyond translating old texts. It was entering the dangerous world of court politics, where a wrong accusation could mean death. I can try, Elara said quietly. Over the following days, Elara moved through the castle with new purpose. The task was more difficult than she had anticipated, not because the evidence was hidden, but because uncovering it meant accepting a terrible truth. She listened to conversations in the ancient language that courtiers spoke in ritual, unaware that she understood every nuance, every shade of meaning. She watched for the symbols she had glimpsed before, strange marks that seemed to be a code, etched in places where only someone looking would find them. Behind portraits, beneath furniture, in the margins of documents. And she felt the currents of emotion around her. The way her strange gift had begun to manifest in new ways that both thrilled and terrified her. The Luna gift was growing stronger with each passing day. She could sense deception like a foul taste in the air, bitter and wrong. She could feel loyalty like warm sunlight on skin, comforting and true. And she could detect betrayal like a cold blade against her skin, sharp and undeniable. It was exhausting, overwhelming to feel so much from so many people. The castle was full of small deceits, petty ambitions, hidden resentments. But beneath it all, there was one source of wrongness that pulsed like an infected wound, constant and growing more dangerous. She began to document everything she found. A conversation overheard in the library between Kaelin and a visiting merchant, conducted in the ancient language. They spoke of shipments and timing, but Elara recognized the coded nature of their words. Shipments meant troop movements. Timing meant battle plans. She found messages in Kaelin's study written in symbols that combined ancient script with a cipher she had to work for 3 days to break. When she finally deciphered them, the content made her blood run cold. Names of soldiers loyal to Valerius marked for elimination. Routes that should have been secret, detailed with precision. Weaknesses in the castle defenses catalogued and ready to be exploited. The trail led impossibly and horrifyingly to Kaelin. Every piece of evidence pointed to him. Every thread of betrayal wound back to the man Valerius called brother. Elara spent sleepless nights hoping she was wrong, reviewing her findings again and again, searching for any other explanation. But the ancient language did not lie, and her gift did not mislead. The truth was inescapable and devastating. During these days of investigation, something else was happening, something Elara had not expected and could not control. Her relationship with Valerius was deepening in ways that went beyond their work together. It began with small moments. The way he would look up from a document and smile when she entered a room as if her presence alone brought him joy. The way he remembered that she preferred honey in her tea and always ensured it was prepared correctly. The way his hand would linger on hers when they exchanged books, his touch warm and steady. They spent hours together, not just working, but talking. Really talking, in ways that went beyond politics and prophecy. He told her about his childhood, about the weight of being born to rule, about the loneliness of having power, but rarely having connection. She told him about her years of hiding, about the fear of being discovered, about the strange dreams that had haunted her before she understood what she was. They shared fears and hopes, doubts and dreams, and with each conversation, the space between them seemed to shrink. One evening, they were in his private study, poring over a particularly difficult text about the original Luna bonds. Elara was sitting on the floor, surrounded by books, her white hair falling forward as she concentrated. Valerius watched her from his chair, and when she looked up to ask him a question, she found him staring at her with an expression that made her breath catch. "What?" she asked softly. "I was just thinking," he said slowly, "about how empty this room was before you came. How empty everything was. I had my kingdom, my duty, my battles, but I did not have this." He gestured between them. "This ease, this connection. You make me want to be better, Elara. Not a stronger king, though you do that too, but a better man." Alara's heart thundered in her chest. "Valerius, I know the timing is wrong," he continued, standing and moving toward her. "I know you are working on something that troubles you, though you have not told me what. I know there are complications and dangers, but I need you to know this. I need you to know that you have become essential to me, not just to my rule, but to my heart." He knelt beside her on the floor, taking her hand in both of his. His dark eyes were intense, vulnerable in a way she had never seen. "I am falling in love with you, Elara Nightshade. Perhaps I have been since the moment you put me in my place in that tavern. And I needed to tell you, even if you cannot return the feeling, even if duty or circumstance makes it impossible, you deserve to know that you are seen, truly seen, and treasured." Tears pricked Elara's eyes. How could she tell him that she had fallen just as hard, just as fast? How could she admit that every moment with him felt like coming home to a place she had never known existed? How could she explain that the thought of causing him pain with what she had discovered about Kaelin was breaking her heart? "I see you too," she whispered. "The man beneath the crown, the one who carries so much weight alone, the one who tries so hard to be strong for everyone else. And I am falling in love with that man, Valerius, with his strength and his gentleness, with his fierce loyalty and his capacity for growth, with everything you are and everything you are becoming." He cupped her face in his hands, sent his touch reverent. "Then we face whatever comes together. Promise me that whatever burden you are carrying, whatever trouble you have found, we face it together." She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. And when he kissed her this time, it was different. This was slower, deeper, a promise sealed with lips and breath and the sharing of souls. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other among the scattered books and ancient words. Two people finding refuge in each other against the storms they knew were coming. But the respite could not last. The evidence was complete. The betrayal was undeniable. And Elara knew she could delay no longer. She did not want to believe it. Despite his clear dislike of her, Kaelin was Valerius's closest friend and most trusted advisor. The king loved him like a brother. Accusing Kaelin would shatter something in Valerius, and Elara found that the thought of causing him pain made her own chest ache in unexpected ways. But the evidence was undeniable. She found him that night in his private chambers, a privilege she had been granted as their work together had deepened. He was alone, standing by the window and looking out over the city, a figure of solitude and power. "Valerius," she said softly. He turned, and his face softened when he saw her. Over the weeks, she had noticed this change in him. When they were alone, the harsh mask of the Alpha King fell away. He smiled more easily. He was gentle in ways the world never saw. "Elara, I did not expect you tonight. I thought you would be reading." He gestured to a chair. "Sit." I could use the company. But she remained standing, her hands clasped before her. I have something to tell you. Something you will not want to hear. His expression sharpened immediately. Tell me. So she did. She laid out everything she had discovered, every piece of evidence, every pattern. She showed him the messages she had found, translated the codes. She explained how the ancient language had helped her sense the deception, how the Luna gift had guided her, and she watched as understanding and devastation warred across his face. When she finished, silence filled the room like lead. Valerius stood motionless, his hands clenched at his sides, his jaw tight. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, broken. Kaelin? I am sorry, Valerius, Elara whispered. I am so sorry. How long? He asked. How long has he been betraying me? I believe at least a year, possibly longer. Valerius moved suddenly, violently, each sweeping his arm across the table and sending maps and documents flying. He was my brother in all but blood. He saved my life in the Northern Campaign. He helped me take the throne. He was the one person I thought I could trust without question. Elara took a step closer, drawn by his pain. I know this hurts, but he is working with your enemies. If we do not act, more lives will be lost. The kingdom itself could fall. Valerius turned to her, and in his eyes she saw such raw anguish that it stole her breath. And if you are wrong? If I move against him based on your word alone, and you are mistaken, I will have destroyed a friendship and my own reputation. I am not wrong, Elara said, meeting his gaze steadily. I wish I were. But the ancient language does not lie, and my gift does not mislead. Kaelin is a traitor. For a long moment they stared at each other. Then Valerius closed the distance in 3 long strides and stood before her. He raised his hand, and for an instant she thought he might strike her in his anger. Instead, he cupped her face gently, his calloused thumb brushing her cheek with a tenderness that made her heart stutter. You have given me truth when it would have been easier to stay silent. You have offered me loyalty I do not deserve when I tried to humiliate you the first night we met. Why? Alara's breath caught. Because you are a good king who deserves better than betrayal. Because the kingdom needs you. And because I believe in you, even when you do not believe in yourself. Something shifted in his eyes. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away. And when she did not, he kissed her. It was urgent, as if he were seeking comfort from the pain of betrayal. I trust you, Elara Nightshade. I do not fully understand why, but I do. If you say Kaelin is a traitor, then we will prove it and stop him. They spent the night planning. They would set a trap. Valerius would announce in Kaelin's presence alone a false military plan. If Kaelin was truly a traitor, he would pass that information along, and they would be waiting. 3 days later, the trap was sprung. Valerius gathered his war council and announced a campaign against the Eastern Territories. Kaelin listened carefully, making suggestions to anyone watching, the perfect advisor. But that night, Elara and Valerius followed him. Using her sensitivity to emotion and his knowledge of the castle's hidden passages, they tracked Kaelin to a meeting with a cloaked figure in the old guard tower. From the shadows, they listened as Kaelin passed along every detail of the false campaign, selling his king's trust for gold and promises of power. When the exchange was complete, Valerius stepped from the shadows. Kaelin turned and the color drained from his face. My king, I can explain. Explain what? Valerius's voice was cold as winter wind. Explain how you have been betraying me for over a year? How you have sold our battle plans? How you have caused the deaths of our warriors? Kaelin's face twisted. You do not understand. They promised me power, position. You have everything, Valerius. You were born to be king. What was I? Always second, always in your shadow. You were my brother, Valerius said, and his voice cracked. I would have given you anything you asked. Instead, you chose betrayal. Guards emerged from other shadows. Kalen tried to run, but he was surrounded. As they dragged him away, he screamed threats and curses. Elara stood beside Valerius, watching until the sounds faded. Then the king's shoulders sagged. Come, Elara said softly, taking his hand. You should not be alone tonight. He allowed her to lead him back to his chambers, this powerful man suddenly seeming lost. In his private rooms, away from the eyes of the castle, Valerius finally broke. He sank into a chair and put his face in his hands, and Elara went to him without hesitation. She knelt before him and took his hands in hers. You did what was necessary, she said. You protected your kingdom. I destroyed my friend, he replied, his voice rough. Part of me died with his betrayal. Elara reached up and cupped his face, then let that part rest, and let what remains become stronger. You are not alone, Valerius. Not anymore. He looked at her, this fierce king with a warrior's hands and a wounded heart, and something profound passed between them. He pulled her up and into his arms, holding her as if she were an anchor in a storm. That night, they became more than king and consultant. They became what the ancient texts had spoken of. Alpha and Luna, two halves of a bond that transcended position and politics. The days that followed were difficult. Kalen was tried before the full council. Elara had to present what she had found, standing before the assembled nobles, translating the coded messages. Some looked at her with newfound respect, others with suspicion. She bore their scrutiny with dignity. Kalen's defense was desperate. He accused Elara of manipulation, of using witchcraft to poison Valerius's mind. But the evidence was too solid. He was stripped of his titles. The ceremony was brutal to witness. Each title taken was like a blow. Kalen was led away to the dungeons to await a final judgment that Valerius could not yet bring himself to pronounce. Execution was the standard punishment, but Valerius could not order the death of the man who had once saved his life. Not yet. In the aftermath, Elara felt only weariness and sorrow. She saw the dimming in Valerius's eyes, but he would not let her withdraw. You gave me truth when I needed it most, he told her one night. You showed me that trust must be earned through action, not assumed through history. That hurt, Elara. But it was necessary pain, the kind that comes from cutting away infection so healing can begin. He tilted her chin up. You are everything I never knew I needed, and I will spend the rest of my days being worthy of the trust you placed in me. Their love became a source of strength as the kingdom slowly adjusted. And as that love deepened, the Luna gift was evolving. Word had spread about Elara. When she walked the halls, people bowed. They called it the Luna's voice, and it calmed disputes and inspired courage. As autumn turned to winter, the council began to murmur about succession. Valerius was a king without a queen. There were suggestions of matches with noble daughters. Each suggestion felt like a knife to Elara's heart, though she tried to hide it. Valerius refused them all. Privately, he worried. He wanted Elara as his queen, but he knew the obstacles. She had no family name, no noble lineage. He was asking the kingdom to accept a tavern waitress. One evening, as snow began to fall, he found Elara in the library. She sat staring at nothing, her face drawn with sadness. The council wants me to marry, he said. Elara forced herself to nod. That is wise. A king needs a queen. The people need to see that you are building a future. Then you agree I should marry? His dark eyes watched her carefully. She swallowed hard. If that is what is best for the kingdom, then yes. Valerius smiled, and there was mischief in it. Good, because I intend to marry you. For a moment, Elara's mind went blank. What? He laughed, the sound rich and warm. Marry me, Elara Nightshade. Be my Luna. Be my queen. Be my partner in all things. I know the council will object. I know they will say you are not of noble birth. But I do not care. You are the strongest, wisest, most courageous woman I have ever known. There is only you. It has only ever been you. Tears pricked Elara's eyes. Valerius, I am no one. I was a tavern waitress. I have no idea who my parents were. How can I be queen? How can I stand beside you when I bring nothing but myself? He stood, bringing her with him. You bring everything. You bring wisdom and courage. You bring the Luna gift. You bring your heart. You bring yourself, and that is more than enough. He kissed her, a kiss that spoke of possession and partnership. Is that a yes? He murmured. Yes, she whispered back. Yes to everything. Yes to being your Luna, your queen, your partner. The announcement caused an uproar. The council erupted in objections. But Valerius stood firm, and beside him so did Elara. When the council called for proof of her worthiness, Elara stood before them and spoke in the ancient language. She recited the verses of unity. Her voice rang through the throne room, and as she spoke, something extraordinary happened. Every person present felt the pack bond surge to life. They felt connected to each other, to their king, to this woman who spoke with the voice of the ancients. The most senior counselor slowly knelt. The Luna has spoken. The blood recognizes what politics would deny. She is worthy. One by one, the others knelt until Elara stood before a room full of bowed heads. The coronation took place during the winter solstice. Elara wore white threaded through with red, like the dress she had worn the night they met. Ancient words were spoken, and when the silver crown was placed upon her head, Elara Nightshade became Elara Shadow-Walker, Luna Queen. That night, alone in their chambers, Valerius pulled her close. "Thank you," he whispered, "for seeing the man beneath the king, for being brave enough to reveal yourself, for everything." Elara looked at her husband. "You saved me too. You gave me purpose. You gave me love." Winter became spring, and the kingdom flourished. Elara's influence tempered Valerius's harsher edges. The people loved her. On a warm summer evening, Elara stood in the garden, her hand resting on her abdomen where new life grew. The Luna gift whispered confirmation. Valerius entered the garden and wrapped his arms around her. "You are smiling. What secret makes you glow so?" Elara turned in his arms and placed his hand where hers had rested. "This secret. We are going to have a child." Valerius dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead against her. "Thank you," he breathed. "Thank you for this gift." The child was born on the first night of winter. A boy, dark-haired like his father with his mother's eyes. They named him Kalen, not for the traitor, but for the meaning of the name in the old tongue. Warrior of Light. He would be the heir to the Alpha King and the Luna Queen. As Elara held him, she felt the Luna gift settle around the child like a blessing. "The ancient language brought us together," Valerius murmured. "Your gift revealed the truth. But love, our choice to love, despite everything, that is what will sustain us." "Yes," Elara agreed. "Love is the truest language of all." They sat in comfortable silence, a family born from impossible circumstances. Outside, the world turned. Inside, 3 hearts beat in harmony. The Alpha King had learned to listen. The Luna Queen had learned to speak. Together, they had created not just an heir, but a legacy. A kingdom not of fear, but of love. And it all began with a king who spoke ancient words he did not fully understand, and a woman who understood them perfectly. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time. Next,